The Galactic Interspecies Council Chamber was enormous. It floated in deep space like a metal flower, surrounded by stars and silence. Inside, hundreds of alien diplomats sat in curved rows. Their eyes and sensors pointed at one figure standing in the center. High Arbiter Roshan, the oldest and most powerful voice in the known galaxy. He stood tall, his gray skin catching the cold light, and he spoke with the calm voice of someone who had already decided the outcome. For 40 years, Roshan began, we have watched the species known as humans. We gave them a chance. We opened our borders. We offered them probationary membership in this council, hoping they would learn, grow, and behave. He paused. The chamber was silent. They did not. A holographic display appeared behind him. Star maps, fleet movements, colony markers, all highlighted in red. Illegal colonization of 3 border systems. Refusal to reduce their military fleet to acceptable levels. Development of weapon classes that violate council law. He let each charge hang in the air like smoke. This council has been patient, but patience has limits. In the far corner of the chamber, sitting in the smallest seat, because that was all humanity had ever been given, a young human diplomat named Park Sun-woo stood up. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. These charges are false, he said. The border systems were unclaimed. Our fleet size is within... His microphone went dead. Just like that. No warning, no apology. The light on his panel turned red, and his voice disappeared into nothing. A few delegates laughed. Roshan didn't even look at him. The council will now vote, Roshan said, all in favor of a formal declaration of war against the United Terran Republic. The votes came fast, one after another. Green lights filling the board like a disease spreading across a map. Nearly every species voted yes. Only one voted no. Ambassador Kellis, a thin, pale-skinned alien with 4 eyes and a reputation for being too careful, stood from his seat and spoke. You are making a terrible mistake. You don't know what you're starting. You don't know what humans are. Roshan smiled the way someone smiles at a child. We know exactly what they are, Kellis. A young species, loud, emotional, playing with sharp objects they don't understand. Kellis sat down slowly. He looked across the chamber at Sun-woo, who was still standing, still silent, his mic still dead. Their eyes met. Kellis shook his head gently, as if to say, I tried. The declaration was official. The Galactic Interspecies Council had declared war on humanity. Across the galaxy, on a blue-green planet called Earth, the city of Seoul was quiet under a night sky. Inside the Terran Naval Command building, a woman named Shin Nari sat in front of a wall of screens. She was the head of Terran intelligence, the person who knew everything about everyone. She watched the council vote happen in real time, her face showing no surprise at all. She had expected this, not hoped for it, not feared it, just expected it, the way a person expects rain when the sky turns dark. She picked up her communicator and pressed one contact. It rang twice. Admiral, Nari said. They voted. It's done. On the other end, there was silence for a long moment. Then a voice, calm, low, and perfectly controlled, answered. Play it for me. Nari played the full recording, every word of Roshan's speech. The vote, Sun-woo being silenced, Kellis being ignored. All of it. Fleet Admiral Han Yuna sat in her office on the top floor of the command building. The room was dark, except for the blue light of the city outside her window. She was 54 years old, with short silver hair and a face that rarely showed emotion. She had served the Terran Navy for 31 years, and in all that time, she had never once raised her voice. She didn't need to. When the recording ended, Yuna was quiet for 10 seconds. Then slowly, She smiled. Not a warm smile. Not a happy one. It was the smile of someone who had been holding their breath for a very long time, and had finally been allowed to exhale. Finally, she said. She reached into the bottom drawer of her desk, the one she kept locked, always, and pulled out a thick folder. The cover read, Operation Homecoming, revised annually, classification Black 7. She opened it. Inside were 37 years of planning, fleet positions, supply chain maps, enemy weakness profiles, psychological warfare strategies, invasion routes drawn and redrawn, updated every year like a garden that someone tended with quiet love and terrifying patience. Every admiral in the Terran Navy knew this folder existed. None of them had ever expected it to be opened. Yuna pressed her communicator again. This time she called Baek Do-hoon, her second-in-command. He answered on the first ring, because Do-hoon always answered on the first ring. Do-hoon, she said, wake the fleet. All of it. There was a pause, not of confusion, but of understanding. Do-hoon had been waiting for this call too. Yes, Admiral, he said. His voice was quiet, the way a river is quiet before it becomes a waterfall. How long do we give them? Yuna looked out the window. The stars were bright over Seoul, brighter than they had any right to be. They gave us 40 years of patience, she said. Give them 40 hours of silence. Yuna closed the folder and placed both hands flat on her desk. She took a slow breath and let it out. Somewhere across the galaxy, 9,000 alien warships were being loaded with weapons and fuel, their crews celebrating a war they believed was already won. Their leaders drank and laughed, and told each other that the humans would beg for mercy within a week. They didn't know that deep inside Earth's asteroid belts, hidden in dark shipyards that no Council spy had ever found, the real Terran fleet was waking up. Ships with no names, no flags, and no mercy. Ships built not for exploration or defense, but for one single terrible purpose. They didn't know about Yuna, about the woman who had spent her entire career preparing for a war she hoped would come. And they certainly didn't know the most dangerous thing about humans, that they didn't fight because they were angry. They fought because they were ready. For 40 hours, Earth said nothing. No angry speeches, no diplomatic protests, no emergency broadcasts or threats of retaliation. The entire United Terran Republic went silent, like a house with all the lights turned off in the middle of the night. And the galaxy noticed. In the Council's war room, War Chief Dren stood before a massive holographic map of the galaxy. He was broad and heavily built, with dark red skin and 2 rows of teeth that he showed often, because he believed it made him look powerful. He commanded the combined military of 12 Council species, over 9,000 warships, the largest fleet ever assembled. He should have felt confident. He did feel confident, but the silence was starting to bother him. Still nothing? He asked his communications officer for the 4th time that day. Nothing, War Chief. No transmissions. No fleet movement. No signals at all from Terran space. Dren tapped a claw on the edge of the console. They're afraid, he said. That's good. But deep down, in a place he would never admit existed, something felt wrong. A species that had been given 40 years of insults, and had never once backed down. Why would they go quiet now? Across the station, Ambassador Kellis was not sleeping. He hadn't slept since the vote. Instead, he sat in his quarters, surrounded by old files. Intelligence reports that the Council had buried years ago. Reports about Earth, about humans. He read about their history. Not the polite version the Council taught in schools, the real version. He read about their world wars, where they killed each other by the millions, and then rebuilt from nothing. He read about their survival instincts, how they had lived through ice ages and plagues and disasters that would have ended most species. He read one line from an old Terran military book that made him put down his tablet and stare at the wall for a long time. It said, No plan survives first contact with the enemy. So we plan for everything. Kellis closed his eyes. He thought about Roshan's words, a young species playing with sharp objects. He thought about the 9,000 ships Dren was so proud of. Then he thought about the silence. And he understood. The humans weren't afraid. They were preparing. And the silence wasn't weakness. It was the sound of something terrible being loaded. Meanwhile, deep inside the asteroid belt of Earth's solar system, the real Terran Navy was waking up. Captain Quan Tejo stood on the bridge of the Iron Fall, a warship that officially did not exist. It was black, angular, and ugly in the way that only functional things can be ugly. It wasn't built to look impressive. It was built to end things. Around him, hundreds of other ships were powering up in the darkness. Their engines glowed faintly blue, like the eyes of animals opening in the dark. These were not the patrol ships the Council had counted. These were the hidden ones, built in secret shipyards, tested in deep space, and maintained by crews who had trained their entire lives for a war that might never come. Until now. Tejo addressed his crew over the internal channel. He didn't give a big speech. He didn't need to. They think they know us, he said. They've met our diplomats, our scientists, our traders. Good people, polite people. He paused. They haven't met us. Not yet. The crew was silent, not because they were scared, because they were listening. In the weapons bay, deep below the bridge, a woman named Cho Unji was running final checks on systems that would have made the Council's best engineers cry. Unji was small, wore thick glasses, and looked like someone who should be teaching at a university. In a way, she was a teacher. She taught metal how to break other metal. She moved between the gravity lances and the void shear torpedoes, checking each one with the care of a mother checking on sleeping children. Then she stopped at the last weapon in the row. It had no official name. On the inventory sheet, it was listed only as GCS-7, but everyone on the ship called it the Knock. Unji placed her hand on its surface and smiled. She had spent 11 years building this thing. She hoped she would never have to use it. But she was glad it was ready. On the command deck of the fleet's flagship, Vice Admiral Baek Do-hun sat in the center chair, watching data scroll across a dozen screens. He was the opposite of Yuna in every visible way. Tall, thin, with a soft voice and a gentle face. But his mind worked like a machine made of knives. He could look at a battlefield and see outcomes the way a chess player sees checkmate 6 moves ahead. A young comms officer named Yoon Ji-won approached him carefully. "Sir," Ji-won said, "permission to ask a question." "Go ahead." "Why are we waiting? 40 hours of silence. What's the point? They already declared war." Do-hun looked at him. There was something almost kind in his expression. "Tell me, Ji-won, when you hear a strange noise in a dark room, what's worse, the noise or the silence after?" Ji-won thought about it. The silence. Right now, every admiral in the Council fleet is lying in their bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering why we haven't responded. Their minds are filling the silence with their own fears. By the time we move, half of them will already be beaten. In here, he tapped the side of his head. Fear is a weapon, Ji-won, and it's the cheapest one we have. At exactly the 40th hour, Fleet Admiral Han Yuna activated a single open broadcast channel. It reached every receiver in the galaxy, military and civilian, council and independent. Every species with the technology to listen heard her voice. There was no video, no image of her face, no Terran flag or anthem, just her voice, calm and cold, like winter wind through an open door. "This is Fleet Admiral Han Yuna of the United Terran Republic. You have declared war on humanity. We accept. You will receive no terms, no warnings, and no second chances. What happens next is your fault." The message lasted 12 seconds. On the council station, Dren listened to it 3 times. The confidence he had carried for 40 hours cracked, just a little, like a line appearing on glass. In his quarters, Kellis listened once. Then he lowered his head and whispered to no one, "What have we done?" And across Terran space, over 4,000 warships that the galaxy didn't know existed turned their engines toward Council territory and began to move. The silence was over. War Chief Dren had positioned his armada at the border of Terran space. 9,000 ships arranged in a perfect crescent formation, the same formation the Council had used to crush rebellions for centuries. It was a wall of metal and firepower that stretched across the darkness of space like a jaw waiting to close. Dren stood on the bridge of his command ship, arms folded, watching the empty space ahead. His officers moved around him in quiet efficiency. The fleet was ready, weapons charged, shields at full, every ship in position. He was expecting 800 enemy ships. That's what the intelligence said. 800 patrol vessels, fast but lightly armed. The math was simple. 9,000 against 800. This wouldn't even be a real battle. It would be a demonstration. Then the sensors screamed. His tactical officer's voice cut through the bridge like a blade. Contact. Massive contact. Multiple signatures jumping into the sector. Dren leaned forward. How many? The officer didn't answer immediately. His fingers moved across the console, and with every second, his face changed. Confusion became disbelief. Disbelief became fear. 4,200, War Chief, and counting. Dren's jaw tightened. 4,000. Where had 4,000 ships come from? The Council had tracked every Terran vessel for decades. They had counted and recounted. 800. That was the number. But the humans had not been building 800 ships. They had been building 800 ships that they wanted the galaxy to see. The rest had been hidden, constructed in silence, in the dark, in places no spy had ever thought to look. The Terran fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Not scattered, not disorganized, perfect, as if every ship knew exactly where it was supposed to be, and had practiced getting there 1,000 times, because they had. At the head of the formation was the Ironfall. Captain Quantejo sat in his chair, calm as a stone at the bottom of a river. His bridge crew moved with practiced silence. No one needed to be told what to do. They had trained for this day every single day for years. Behind the Ironfall, the rest of the fleet spread out in patterns that the Council's tactical computers couldn't recognize. They weren't using any known formation. They were using something new, something designed by Baek Do-hun over 15 years of careful, obsessive work. Dren gave the order. All ships, engage. 9,000 Council ships opened fire. The space between the two fleets lit up with energy beams, plasma bolts, and missile trails. It was the largest display of firepower the galaxy had seen in 300 years, and the Terran ships moved through it like water through fingers. They didn't fly in straight lines. They didn't hold formation the way Council doctrine expected. They split, regrouped, feinted left, and struck right. Small groups of Terran ships would draw fire from an entire Council wing, then vanish, only for a different group to appear behind the same wing and tear it apart. Do-hun watched the battle from the flagship's command center. He didn't shout orders. He spoke them quietly, and they moved down the chain like electricity through a wire. Group 7, pull back and reposition to grid 44. Group 12, you have an opening on their left carrier line. Take it. Group 3, hold. Let them come to you. Now, hit them. Every instruction was precise, every response was instant. The Terran fleet fought like one body with 4,000 hands, and Do-hun was the brain. Dren watched his fleet numbers dropping on the tactical display. 100 ships gone, then 300, then 500. His formations were breaking apart. His officers were reporting confusion, miscommunication, and panic on channels that should have been calm and controlled. He had more ships. He had more firepower, but the humans didn't fight fair. They didn't stand still and trade blows like honorable warriors. They moved, adapted, and exploited every gap, every hesitation, every moment of confusion. Then Tejo gave the order everyone on the Ironfall had been waiting for. "Unji," he said over the internal channel, "it's time." Deep in the weapons bay, Cho Unji pushed her glasses up her nose and placed her hand on the activation panel. She took a breath and pressed it. The weapon known as the knock fired. No explosion, no sound. What happened was something much worse. A section of space approximately 2 kilometers wide simply folded in on itself. The physics were complicated, but the result was simple. Everything inside that space was compressed. Ships, shields, crew, atoms, all of it crushed into a point smaller than a coin. An entire Council carrier group, 47 ships, disappeared in less than a second. Not destroyed, not damaged, erased. The Council fleet saw it happen. Every sensor on every ship recorded the moment 47 vessels became nothing. And then, the panic really started. Ships began breaking formation without orders. Captains who had never seen anything like this started turning their ships around. Communications channels filled with screaming, praying, and begging for information that no one had. Dren stood on his bridge, watching his fleet fall apart. He had trained for war his entire life. He had never, not once, considered the possibility that he could lose. He considered it now. "All ships," he said, and his voice was steady, even though his hands were not. "Fall back. Regroup at waypoint 7. Fall back." The retreat was not orderly. It was fast and messy, ships crashing into each other's flight paths, leaving wounded vessels behind. In 3 hours, the Council had lost 2,000 ships, and the battle hadn't even reached its second phase. Tejo watched them go. He did not order a pursuit. That was not the plan. Instead, he opened a broadcast on the Council's own emergency frequency, the one they used for distress signals and surrender requests. Every surviving Council ship heard his voice. "That was a greeting," Tejo said calmly. "The Admiral sends her regards." On the Council station, far behind the front lines, High Arbiter Roshan stood in his private chamber, watching the battle data replay on his screen. The numbers were impossible. The footage was impossible. Everything he had believed about humans, that they were young, that they were weak, that they were manageable, all of it was burning in front of his eyes. Ambassador Kellis entered without knocking. He stood behind Roshan and looked at the same screen. "I told you," Kellis said quietly. "I told all of you." Roshan said nothing. His hands were shaking, and for the first time in his long life, he could not stop them. Back on Earth, in the Terran Naval Command building in Seoul, Han Yuna watched the battle report update in real time. The numbers were good, better than projected. The fleet had performed exactly as Do-hun had designed. She didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. Celebrations were for people who thought the hard part was over. Shin Nari entered the room with a tablet in her hand. "Phase 1 is complete, Admiral. The border is ours. What now?" Her eyes were sharp and clear, like glass that had been cleaned until it was invisible. "Phase 2, she said. "Find me their supply lines, their communication relays, and their morale. I want all 3 cut by morning." Nari nodded and left. Yuna turned back to the window. Outside, Seoul was bright and alive, millions of people going about their evening without knowing what had just happened at the edge of their territory. She would keep it that way. That was the whole point, to fight so well, so completely, and so far from home that the people back here never had to be afraid. That was what the Council would never understand about humans. They didn't fight because they loved war. They fought because they loved everything behind them, and they would burn the galaxy to keep it safe. After the battle at the border, the galaxy expected humanity to invade. Every military textbook said the same thing. After a decisive victory, you push forward, take territory, and force the enemy to fight on their own ground. Han Yuna had read every one of those textbooks. Then she had thrown them away and written her own. She didn't invade. She didn't push forward. Instead, she did something far worse. She took the council apart from the inside. Shin Nari had been building intelligence networks for over 20 years. While the council had been busy ignoring humans, Nari had been busy learning everything about the council. She knew their supply routes the way a surgeon knows veins. She knew their communication systems the way an electrician knows wiring. And she knew their secrets the way only a spy could, patiently, quietly, and completely. The first week after the border battle, council supply convoys began disappearing. Not destroyed. That would have been simple, expected, something the council could respond to. Instead, the convoys simply went to the wrong place. Navigation systems were hacked so cleanly that the crews didn't notice anything unusual. They followed their routes, checked their instruments, and arrived at coordinates where there was nothing but empty space. 12 supply convoys vanished in the first week alone. No explosions, no wreckage, just gone. Dren, still recovering from the border defeat, sent warships to escort the convoys. It didn't help. The hacking was so precise that even the escort ships were redirected. One council destroyer spent 3 days flying in a slow circle around an empty asteroid. Its entire crew convinced they were heading to a fuel station that didn't exist. Then, the communication relays started failing. The council's communication network was its backbone. Millions of relay stations spread across thousands of systems, connecting 12 species in real time. It had worked perfectly for centuries. Now, one by one, the relays began going dark. Not all at once. That would have been obvious. Instead, they failed in cascading patterns. 1 here, 2 there, 5 more the next day. Each failure cutting off a different section of council space from the rest. Species that had been allies for centuries suddenly couldn't talk to each other. Fleet commanders couldn't reach their supply officers. Politicians couldn't reach their military. Planets couldn't reach their governments. The council tried to fix the relays. Their engineers would repair one, and 3 more would fail. It was like trying to stop a leak with your fingers while new holes appeared in the wall. This was Nari's work. She sat in her office in Seoul, drinking tea, and watched the council's infrastructure collapse on her screens, with the satisfaction of someone who had been building a puzzle for 20 years and was finally seeing the picture. But Nari's most devastating weapon wasn't technology. It was truth. She had the evidence, the real records, showing that High Arbiter Roshan had fabricated the charges against humanity. The border systems were legally unclaimed. The Terran fleet had never exceeded agreed limits, because the agreements had no limits. The Council had never bothered to set any, assuming humans were too primitive to build a real navy. The banned weapons charge was based on technology that the Council itself had classified after developing it first. Nari didn't broadcast this evidence publicly. That would have been crude. Instead, she sent it privately to moderate factions within 3 Council species, officials who had always been uneasy about the war, who had voted yes only because Roshan had pressured them. The effect was immediate. Political fights broke out inside Council governments. Accusations flew. 2 species launched formal investigations into the war's legal basis. One species, the same one Ambassador Kellis belonged to, formally withdrew from the war effort, calling it an illegal action based on fraudulent evidence. The Council was cracking, and not a single Terran soldier had set foot on Council soil. Aboard the Ironfall, young comms officer Yoon Ji-won spent his days monitoring intercepted Council transmissions. It was his job to listen, translate, and report. But the things he heard stayed with him long after his shift ended. He heard supply officers begging for food shipments that never arrived. He heard ship captains pleading for reinforcements, their voices cracking with exhaustion. He heard ordinary crew members, people not so different from him, asking each other why they were fighting a war that no one seemed to want. One night, Jiwan sat alone in the mess hall, staring at his untouched food. Captain Taeho found him there. "You're not eating," Taeho said, sitting across from him. "I've been listening to them," Jiwan said. "The council crews, they're scared, they're confused. Some of them don't even know why they're fighting us." He looked at Taeho. "Are we the good guys here?" Taeho was quiet for a moment. He picked up a piece of bread from Jiwan's tray and ate it slowly before answering. "We're the survivors," he said. "That's all we've ever been. Good and bad are for people who get to choose their fights. We didn't choose this. We just got chosen." Jihan thought about that for a long time after Taeho left. Weeks passed. The council grew weaker every day. Their fleet, already reduced by 2,000 ships at the border, lost more to maintenance failures, fuel shortages, and crews that simply refused to keep fighting. Dren held what remained together through sheer willpower, but even he was running out of options. In a final desperate move, Dren gathered his best remaining ships, a strike force of 400, and launched a direct attack on a Terran colony world called New Busan. It was a civilian planet, home to 3 million people. Dren believed that threatening civilians would force Yuna to negotiate. He didn't know that Yuna had expected exactly this move. Nari's intelligence had tracked the strike force from the moment it assembled. 3 days before Dren's ships arrived, every civilian on New Busan was quietly evacuated. Every man, woman, and child was moved to underground shelters or off-world transports. The cities were emptied. The farms were emptied. The entire planet was turned into a hollow shell, a shell filled with teeth. When Dren's strike force dropped out of faster-than-light travel above New Busan, they found no panicked civilians, no distress calls, no easy target. Instead, they found 3 rings of automated weapons platforms orbiting the planet like silent guards. The platforms activated the moment the council ships appeared, and what followed was not a battle. It was a trap closing shut. In 20 minutes, Dren lost 230 ships. The rest fled, scattered, and broken. Dren survived. His command ship was damaged, half its systems dead, smoke filling the corridors. He sat in his chair, bleeding from a cut on his head, and stared at the tactical display that showed nothing but debris where his strike force had been. He opened a channel. Not a military channel, not an encrypted one, a simple, open broadcast that anyone could hear. "Admiral Yuna," he said. His voice was tired, defeated, but still steady, because Dren was, despite everything, a soldier. "What are you?" The response came 30 seconds later. Yuna's voice, calm as ever, cold as ever, patient. One word, that was all she gave him. Dren closed the channel and sat in silence while his damaged ship limped home. He had fought wars for 40 years. He had won every single one, but he had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that didn't just fight you, but understood you, predicted you, and took you apart piece by piece until there was nothing left. In Seoul, Yuna stood at her window. Nari approached her with the latest report. Another council species had withdrawn from the war. That made 4. The council was falling apart. "It's almost over," Nari said. Yuna shook her head slowly. "Almost isn't over. Keep pushing. They need to understand that this ends only when we say it ends." Nari nodded and left. Yuna placed her hand against the glass. On the other side, the stars burned quietly in the dark. She didn't enjoy this. She had never enjoyed this. But she was very, very good at it. And sometimes, that was enough. 3 months after the war began, the Galactic Interspecies Council was a shadow of what it had been. 4 species had formally withdrawn. The combined fleet, once 9,000 ships strong, was down to barely 3,000. Most of them damaged, undersupplied, and crewed by soldiers who hadn't slept properly in weeks. Trade across council space had collapsed. Planets that had once been wealthy were rationing food. Communication networks still flickered in and out like dying candles. And through it all, the Terran fleet had not lost a single major engagement. High Arbiter Roshan called an emergency session of the council. It was supposed to be a rally, a moment to remind the remaining members why they were fighting, to reignite their will and their unity. Roshan had prepared a speech. He had practiced it in front of a mirror, the way he always did, adjusting his voice and his posture until every word sounded like destiny. He entered the council chamber expecting to command the room one last time. Instead, he found her waiting for him. Han Yuna stood in the center of the chamber, or rather, her holographic projection did. She was broadcasting from Seoul, but the image was so clear, so sharp, that she might as well have been there in person. She stood in the exact spot where humanity's diplomat, Park Sun-woo, had been silenced 3 months ago. The exact spot where his microphone had been cut and his voice had been erased. She stood there now, and no one could silence her. Roshan stopped in the doorway. Around the chamber, the remaining council delegates sat in their seats, watching. Some looked angry, some looked afraid. Most looked tired. The deep, bone-level tiredness of people who had been losing for so long, they had forgotten what winning felt like. Yuna spoke first. "High Arbiter," she said. Her voice was the same as it had always been, calm, measured, and absolutely in control. "Please, sit down. I have something to say, and I would like everyone to hear it." Roshan didn't sit. He stood in the doorway, gripping the frame with one hand, staring at the woman who had dismantled his empire without ever setting foot in it. "You have no right to be here," he said. "This is the council chamber. You are an enemy combatant." "I am a fleet admiral addressing the people who declared war on my species," Yuna replied. "I think I have earned the right to speak. You can cut my microphone if you like. You seem to enjoy doing that." The chamber was so quiet that the hum of the air system sounded loud. Roshan looked around for support. He found none. He walked to his seat and sat down. Yuna let the silence hold for a moment. Then she began. "3 months ago, you voted to go to war with humanity. The charges were false. The evidence was fabricated. The vote was manipulated. You know this now. Many of your own governments have confirmed it." She paused, letting the words settle. "But I did not come here to shame you. Shame is a waste of time, and I don't waste time." She took a step forward. The hologram moved with perfect clarity, her boots making no sound on the chamber floor. "I came here to offer terms." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Roshan's jaw tightened. "The terms are as follows," Yuna continued. "First, the United Terran Republic will be recognized as a full sovereign power with a permanent senior seat on this council. Not probationary, not conditional. Permanent." She let that sink in. "Second, this council will issue a formal public statement admitting that the war declaration was based on fabricated charges. Every species in the galaxy will hear it." Roshan's face darkened, but he said nothing. "Third, reparations. Not in resources. We don't need your resources. We want access. Full and unrestricted access to council scientific archives, trade routes, and diplomatic channels. The doors you kept closed to us for 40 years will be opened." She paused one final time. "Fourth, High Arbiter Roshan will be removed from his position immediately." The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted. Roshan rose from his seat, his face twisted with fury. "This is blackmail," he snarled. "This is the behavior of criminals, not a civilized species. I will not—" "You will," Yuna said, and her voice cut through the noise like a knife through paper. the chamber went quiet again. Because the alternative is that this war continues, and I think we both know how that ends. Roshan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. For the first time in his life, he had no words. Ambassador Kellis stood from his seat. He was thin and tired, his 4 eyes heavy with exhaustion, but he stood straight and spoke clearly. "She is right," Kellis said. He looked at Roshan, then at the rest of the chamber. "You started this war because you were afraid of them. And now you know you were right to be afraid. But not because they are monsters." He shook his head slowly. "Because they are better at this than we ever were. They always were. We just refused to see it." He turned to face the full chamber. "Accept the terms. End this while we still can." The vote was not unanimous, but it didn't need to be. One by one, the remaining council members cast their votes. Green lights appeared on the board, slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. The terms were accepted. Roshan was removed. The war was over. In Seoul, Yuna ended the broadcast and sat down in her chair. The room was empty, except for Baek Do-hun, who stood by the door holding 2 cups of tea. He walked over and set one on her desk. "Congratulations, Admiral," he said quietly. Yuna picked up the cup and held it between both hands. The warmth spread through her fingers. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She just sat there, holding the tea, looking at the steam rising in slow curls. "It's not a victory, Do-hun," she said. "It's a correction. The galaxy was out of balance. Now it's a little less out of balance." Do-hun sat in the chair across from her. What now? Seoul stretched below her. Millions of lights, millions of lives, people going to work and coming home and eating dinner and putting their children to bed. They had never known how close the war had come to reaching them. If Yuna had her way, they never would. "Now we do what we always do," she said. "We build, we protect, and we wait for the next time someone forgets what we are." Do-hun nodded slowly. He sipped his tea. Outside, the stars were bright. Across the galaxy, aboard the Ironfall, Yoon Ji-hwan sat at his desk in the small quarters he shared with 3 other officers. The ship was heading home. The war was over. He should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt heavy. Heavy with everything he had seen and heard over the last 3 months. The battles, the silence, the intercepted transmissions from enemy crews, who were just as scared and confused as he had been. He opened his personal log. He stared at the blank screen for a long time. Then he began to write. "The galaxy called us young," he wrote. "They called us reckless, fragile, emotional. They looked at our short lives and our loud voices and decided we were nothing, a species that would burn itself out before it ever mattered." He paused, thought about Yuna's calm voice, about Do-hun's quiet patience, about Taeho's steady hands, about Eunji's careful smile. They thought war would break us. They didn't understand. War is where we were born. Every scar on our history, every tragedy, every fall, we got back up. Every single time. Not because we are strong, because we refuse to stay down. He took a breath. Peace is what we fight for. It is the only thing worth fighting for. And if the galaxy ever forgets that, if they ever look at us and see something small, something weak, something safe to push around. He wrote the last line slowly, pressing each letter with purpose. Then God help them, because we won't. He closed the log and turned off the screen. The Ironfall hummed quietly around him, carrying him and 4,000 other tired humans back toward a small blue planet that had no idea how much it was loved. Outside the window, the stars stretched on forever, silent, patient, waiting, just like them.